now I'm passing to our last speaker, to our special guest, Dr. Richard Falk. I know you've all been waiting for him to take the floor, and we are very glad to have him here. And before you start, I would first like to express really our support for your great work and the important and difficult mission that you have in this field. We highly appreciate your effort, and I think we should encourage him to continue his work the way he's doing now. Well, just to introduce him very briefly, I'm sure most of you know him. So he's Professor Emeritus of International Law at the Princeton University and Project Director of Global Climate Change, Human Security and Democracy, University of California. He was leading academic voice against the Vietnam War, and he was also very engaged in the outlawing of nuclear weapons. In 2008, he was appointed UN Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights on Palestinian territories occupied since 1967. So thank you very much, Dr. Jafar, for being here with us. You have the floor.
Thank you, Daniela. And let me say I feel honored and humbled by being on this panel. Someone who spoke as Issa Amro did about the daily realities of resisting occupation has genuine courage. It makes me feel, as I say, very humble in his presence, because he really confronts the ugliness of what has been imposed upon the Palestinian people. And what is true for Hebron is so important because it's the extreme that exemplifies the entire occupation. It is in one sense, it is more severe. The situation there is more severe and more exaggerated, but it isn't different in quality from what the people throughout occupied Palestine have been experiencing for 46 years. And you have the notion of what is called an occupation extending for that length of time. It is something that is, our political and moral imagination cannot absorb that. To have children born into occupation and die in occupation, it is something beyond the horizon of our capacity for comprehension. And so it's very valuable to have that kind of witnessing that he has brought to our own experience. And likewise, my colleague on my right here has brought a very neglected perspective to the general discussion of the Palestinian ordeal, which is to make us aware that it's not only a territorial problem, that it is a problem of people above all, and that the refugee issue cannot be brushed aside as a kind of inconvenient inconvenient and incidental aspect of the essential issue, which is land for peace, which is an effort to territorialize the conflict. And as he points out, to have a diaspora of 7 million people, which is approximately double the number of people living under occupation, number of Palestinians living under occupations, it gives some sense of how the international community has distorted the perception of the issue. And so it's what his work, I think, is invaluable in allowing us to have a fuller understanding of why the tragedy, the Palestinian tragedy, is more than the tragedy of occupation. And as, again, as he points out, and I'm just trying to underscore the importance of it, not only have the Palestinians suffered from expulsion from their land of historic residence, but they've suffered cumulative tragedies as being the scapegoat of choice in these countries that have experienced instability of one kind or another. And he mentioned Kuwait and Iraq and now Syria. Also Jordan, of course, at an earlier time, in Lebanon. So that it is unprecedented in historical experience that a people would be expelled from their own land and then have these double, triple, quadruple tragedies added to that initial Nakba experience. Let me speak myself very briefly against this background that has been so well presented to us, and visually as well as verbally, which I would summarize as with one phrase: the cruelty of geopolitics has now for decades victimized the Palestinian people. And what I mean by that is that it is the failure of the international community to have tolerated this terrible sequence of developments, despite the fact that uniquely in relation to the whole decolonization process had a historic responsibility, inheriting Palestine from the British Mandate. And the British Mandate, of course, generating this problem to begin with by the Balfour Declaration, as if the self-determination of the Palestinian people could be decided in the British Foreign Office, you know, which was a huge colonialist act of arrogance. And even the UN partition agreement of 1947 that fragmented historic Palestine was again a hugely arrogant act that that thought that the destiny of the Palestinian people could be determined by others than themselves. It contradicted, in other words, the fundamental ethos of self-determination, which was the foundation of decolonization, the foundational norm of decolonization, and is incorporated as the Article 1 of the 2 Human Rights Covenants. And the opposite of self-determination is imperialism, or settler colonialism. And it's really that tension that is at the core of the conflict as it has unfolded over the decades now. And this issue is the symbolic, moral challenge to the international community at this time. It had been previously, I think, the racist apartheid regime of South Africa that was the sort of litmus test of human solidarity. And now I think the Palestinian struggle has emerged as the successor to that, and the people of the people who grasp an identity, a human identity that extends beyond their own accidents of national affiliation, are drawn to this issue as the most important symbolic site of struggle that is presently engaging those who care about human rights in a existential way, not as an abstraction, but as something that affects our lives, even if it seems geographically remote. And one of the disservices that the global media has performed is to keep this conflict remote, and particularly to keep the kinds of daily ordeals that were described so vividly for us out of our field of consciousness, unless we make a special effort. We have to make a special effort to find this, to grasp the depth of the suffering and ordeal that this humanitarian, political, and social catastrophe has produced ever since 1948, and really ever since 1917, depending on how one characterizes it. And what is also here in this setting is that an occupation that goes on this long has the features of becoming a new permanent reality. And Israel, from the beginning, in my view, never conceived of this occupation as temporary or as something that would be reversed. And it has played a mind game with the international community by talking about some kind of two-state solution. Its own linguistic discourse internally has confirmed that, referring to not the, it only refers to the occupied territory when it's talking internationally. Internally, it always uses the language of Judea and Samaria. And it talks not about Palestinians, it talks about Arabs. It tries to externalize the, on the one level, it's trying to make the point that the video clip, that this land is really ours, biblically, militarily, economically, in every way. It's trying to make that point, and at the same time it's trying to say it really is the legacy of that famous remark of Golda Meir, there are no Palestinians. Who are the Palestinians? And it's really trying to denationalize the Palestinian identity by describing them, describing the people resident in Palestine as Arabs, not as Palestinians. And therefore they don't really belong in Palestine. They belong in an Arab, and if you talk to many Israelis, that's what they'll tell you. There are 22 Arab countries. Why don't, we're the only Jewish country in the region. Why shouldn't the Arab countries absorb? They want to keep the refugees as a issue. You know, it's a kind of perverse reading of the refugee problem. So, what prolonged occupation really has transformed itself into is creeping annexation, apartheid regime, the consolidation of settler colonial ambitions, and a permanent set of realities that are not at all accommodated within either human rights law or international humanitarian law. There is no protection, which is the theme, I think, of the two prior presentations. So let me end by saying that I think this is a reality that has short-term and longer-term challenges confronting all of us in the international community. The short-term challenge is to make sure that the situation doesn't get worse by failing to fund the operations that are necessary for the subsistence of the Palestinian people. And of course, the long-term legitimacy war that is being waged globally through a solidarity movement and territorially by Palestinian resistance in various forms is something that I think eventually will vindicate the cause of justice that has been so long denied in relation to the Palestinian people. Thank you for your attention. Let me stop there. Welcome questions.